Good evening, I should say, everyone. Welcome to another edition of the Home Run Hitters podcast. I'm Charles Vacassian, along with my co-host Andrew Quinn. Andrew, how are we?
Chuck, I'm doing well, man. Was fun chopping it up with you beforehand, and excited to get into the show with you today. We got a lot of good content for everybody.
Absolutely, I couldn't agree more. So we have a lot of good stuff for you guys today. In a little while, we're going to be getting into our own little mock draft where Andrew and I are going to make our draft our teams, and we're going to kind of see who we think has the better roster. We'll nitpick each other's draft picks, who we think we reached for, maybe who we got a bit of a steal. But before that,
they're all going to be perfect. All the picks are going to be perfect. What are you talking about?
Oh, of course. How can I forget? Nobody makes mistakes here.
Yeah.
But before we get into that, spring training's finally begun, folks. So we've got some baseball games that we've been able to watch. So we wanted to kind of take a look at some of the names that we've been noticing that have been playing pretty well in the spring, and maybe some guys who are struggling a little bit. So, Andrew, why don't we start with you? Who are some guys that you've had your eye on so far in spring training?
One guy that's popped out to me so far has been outfielder Joe Adell with the Angels. This is a guy who we've kind of talked about for seems like a couple of years now of a top-end prospect in baseball that's getting ready to break out, and he is currently tied for second in all of players so far this spring training with 3 home runs. So it's good to see him have some pop at the plate. Is this a guy that is he's looking like he's going to be on the opening day roster? He kind of went in between the minors and the majors last year, but he can provide some pop, and he's a fast, good defensive outfielder. So it's exciting to see him start off well.
Absolutely. He's one of the top guys in that Angels system. And, the Angels, they have good hitters. But adding someone else to that mix with Mike Trout, that's going to be huge. Take that lineup over the top. So that's something we'd love to see.
Yeah, definitely. What about you, Chuck? Anybody been standing out to you so far?
As for me, a guy who actually played pretty well last year, who, I think has been playing pretty well so far in camp is Logan Webb of the San Francisco Giants.
Yeah.
And, because I admit I was a little skeptical to see whether or not he could replicate his 2021 breakout season. But so far, as of the last couple of days, he pitched 5 innings, only 1 run allowed, just 3 hits, 10 strikeouts. And that's pretty incredible production, albeit in a limited sample size given his spring training. Unless you're the Mets and you want to throw Max Scherzer for 6 innings, you're not typically going to have your starter go that long. But I like what I've seen so far, and I'm looking forward to seeing what he can do in the regular season.
Yeah, and I think it definitely speaks to what you said, the fact that the Giants did stretch him out so far in that first start. It's spring training, so it's not uncommon to see your starter get pulled out after maybe one time through the lineup or maybe even just early in the 4th inning. So if Webb was able to get 10 strikeouts and last, like you said, 6 innings, he must have been really rolling. So it's good for the Giants to see one of their young stud pitchers locked in so early in spring training.
Absolutely. Anyone else that you were kind of keeping an eye on, someone who's standing out?
Yeah, just one other guy who kind of struggled offensively, who was kind of a big fantasy producer for us back in 2019, Kestenhira for the Brewers. He's got 8 hits. 8 RBIs so far this spring training, which is promising to see because he was a solid offensive producer in seasons past and kind of struggled last year. So hopefully he can get back on track with a good spring training under his belt to start the season.
That's what we'd love to hear. So I'll go forward with one more as well, I guess. And a guy that I'm happy to see is kind of getting back on his feet a little bit, looks a little more comfortable, is Gregory Soto of the Yankees. He's shifting over to second base, which is a much more comfortable position. When he played shortstop last year, that was a bit of a struggle. His offensive stats dipped because he has some defensive struggles and he kind of let it get to his head. But he's been playing second base most of spring training. He has an on-base percentage over 600, which is, absolutely incredible. He's working his walks. He's being patient, and he's using the opposite field. Gleyber Torres is at his best when he's cranking balls to the opposite field. In his, I believe, it was 2019 season where he had 38 home runs, a lot of his power was coming from going the other way at Yankee Stadium, and that's going to help him a lot. So if he can keep using that, and it seems like he's just in a much more comfortable state of mind now that he has less pressure on him at second base, I'm counting on a bit of a bounce-back season from him.
Yeah, that would be nice to see. And like you said, when hitters can hit the ball the opposite way, it just gives them an extra dimension to their offensive game, and it makes it that much harder to pitch to them. For pitchers too, especially for a lot of guys on the Yankees, playing it on a shorter field, your temptation is to try to put the ball into the seats, right? To hit home runs. And sometimes that's not an approach that's going to lead to a lot of success at the plate. And no success at the plate means less fantasy production for us. So hopefully he sticks with it and doesn't try to get too pull happy and try to hit every ball out to left field. If he can stay back, that's going to do well for his batting average. It's going to do well for his on-base percentage. It's going to lead to more fantasy production too.
Absolutely. Now that we've gone over some high risers, I'd like for each of us to note one player you've noticed so far this spring training who has not performed to expectations or has simply just been awful. Why don't you give us a name, Andrew?
Man, my first one, it's tough. I'm going to have to go with somebody that's on my Cardinals right now. And we were kind of teasing it pregame, but somebody that I have a lot of high hopes for is Nolan Gorman with the Cardinals. He's an exciting prospect in our system. I know personally a guy that he trains with in the offseason. I know he's been working really hard to kind of retool his swing. And the results haven't been there yet. He's striking out a lot, which, is not uncommon for some of these minor league guys when they're facing more big league talent in spring training. But, he's also like we were talking about before the show, Chuck, he's kind of working with a newer swing, a newer approach at the plate. So it'll probably just take him a little while to get into his groove. But he's a guy that, again, I have high hopes for. By no means do I think he's going to be on the opening day roster, but he's a guy that hopefully will be in the Cardinals uniform soon and producing at the big league level. Absolutely.
Gorman's one of the top prospects in baseball. He's definitely got a lot of potential. So I'm looking forward to the day that he gets to come up and join the big league roster. A name of mine that I noticed is struggling so far, Andrew Heaney with the Los Angeles Dodgers. And Heaney's a guy that's kind of been passed around a little bit since he left the Angels. He was on my Yankees for a little bit last year to my detriment. And then left as a free agent to go sign with the Dodgers for $8 million, which is a surprising amount for a pitcher who's seen his fair share of struggles. But lot apparently we're trying to get him at the beginning of free agency because they liked a lot of his peripherals and they think that they just need to kind of unlock some of his control and his location problems. But in his first spring training start today, actually, for the Dodgers, he pitched 3 innings and he gave up 4 runs and 6 hits in a limited sample size. And that's a lot of the same stuff that he was struggling with in New York and in LA. The home run ball and the extra base hits are what absolutely kills him. He'll get ahead of a lot of hitters. He'll get to 0-2, he'll get to 1-2, but he can't put them away. And then he's forced to make some pitches and he simply doesn't execute that well. And he leaves it over to play and it gets crushed. I was watching a little bit of that game earlier today, and he didn't locate, and I pitched to Luis Robert, who's a stud, and Luis Robert doesn't miss mistakes, and he absolutely crushed it out of the park for a long home run. And you're going to see a lot of that. The Dodgers can't fix what Andrew Heaney seems to struggle with.
Yeah, and I think it's been, worth mentioning too with a guy like Heaney is, he is older, but he's not irreplaceable for some of these teams. If he doesn't produce, he's not going to find himself on a big league roster this year. So hopefully he can turn it around and start to get back on track. I will say, Chuck, has it been surprising to you at all just seeing some of the offensive success early on in spring training? Because I know typically the old adage is that pitchers kind of have the upper hand, right? When spring training starts, when you're throwing to batters for the first time in a couple of months for some of these guys, and especially post-lockout because we missed a couple extra weeks of spring training starting with that getting delayed. Are you surprised to see some of the offensive production that we've seen, or do you think that there's maybe something going on with the pitchers not being ready? What's going on there?
Yeah, I got to be honest with you, Andrew. I'm a little surprised because, usually we see the pitchers kind of, start off on the right foot or the hitters just, extraordinarily struggle. So this is a bit of a change. But I just think that, with the way the lockout ended, it's kind of just shifted things a little bit. So the hitters have had a little more time to, because it's not like these players are just sitting on the couch eating potato chips. These guys are still.
What? Really?
But these are guys that are still working out and, prepping their game and hitting in the cages and doing all sorts of drills and stuff like that. They're ready and they're raring and ready to go. I could be wrong, but I found that in past experiences as a player myself back in my day that it was a little easier to prep as a hitter than it was as a pitcher. Because I think it was a little easier on your own time to do hitting drills and hitting mechanics and stuff like that than it would be for pitching. So I think maybe the hitters have just had a little more time to get their stuff together and be ready to go. And the pitchers are still taking a little more time to kind of adapt and get going.
Sure. Yeah, and I'm sure that it has been tough, especially for some of those pitchers not getting to spend as much time with their battery mates, maybe throwing to a new catcher. Obviously there's a lot of organizational moves that are happening across the league, new guys coming into new teams. So, yeah, uncomfortable still is probably a good place to put it, but we still got plenty of ball left before we get to opening day. And like I said, it is a pleasant surprise, and it's good news for fantasy gamers to see a lot of offensive production early on. Maybe not as much for those that are in pitcher heavy leagues or where you're relying on a lot of pitchers to get you through the season. But, you land the right guys, you're going to be just fine. And I think that leads us perfectly into kind of the main hunk of the show for today, Chuck. We teased it earlier, but we're going to be running a little fantasy mock draft for you guys here in a second. But before we do that, just wanted to remind you all that we're presented by Sports Time HQ. And one of the presenting sponsors of our show is Underdog Fantasy. Chuck and I love using Underdog Fantasy in the MLB season, in the football season. Right now, we're in the middle of basketball season. For those of you that watch NBA games, you can parlay picks for over-under total points, rebounds, assists, combinations for some of your favorite players or your favorite teams. Chuck and I are going to be giving you guys some tips in season on how to hopefully bankrupt Underdog with some MLB picks, some big action parlays that we're going to throw some money on. So be sure to follow us along in season for that. But you can see it at the ticker across the bottom of your screen. If you use promo code SportsTimeHQ all together at checkout, Underdog is going to give you an instant match deposit of up to $100. So if you throw $50 in there with the promo code SportsTimeHQ, you're going to get $50 back. That's $100 that you can go do some best ball drafts for football right now, do some NBA drafts. So thanks again to Underdog, and thanks to Sports Time HQ for presenting the Home Run Hitters podcast. All right, Chuck, let's get into this mock draft here. I'm excited to see where it turns out because, like you said, when we were getting it set up, it's going to randomize the draft order, and we've got 10 teams in here. So I'm either hoping that I get put at one of the turns. I don't want the pressure of the 101 right now, though. I don't think that I don't want to have to pull the trigger on the 101, but we'll see what happens.
So just for a little background for our viewers and for our listeners, we're going to be doing a little bit of a mock draft for you. And the basis is that it's just a normal redraft 1-year league. It's points based and randomized draft order. We'll be using the Fantasy Pros MLB Draft Wizard mock draft simulator. Kind enough to be able to have easy access for multiplayer use, so Andrew and I can draft at the same time. Very handy. We do appreciate that. And we'll kind of be reading each of you the picks as we go along because I am nowhere near tech savvy enough to show you my screen on my computer. So I will just read you my picks as I go along, and at the end we'll kind of do a little more of an overview and discuss each other's teams. So without further ado, Andrew, are you ready?
Let's do it.
All right, draft is starting.
Electric content for those of you sitting at home watching. Right, doing
different things for you guys, so we hope
the moment you've been waiting for.
Oh yeah.
All right, we are 18 seconds away from starting, and oh my God, did I get the 101? I might have gotten the 101.
Ladies and gentlemen, did Andrew Quinn get the first overall pick in?
I think I might have gotten stuck with the 101.
Really?
Yep, I got the 101.
That's a lot of pressure.
Well, we only have 30 seconds, so I'm not going to give you a whole spiel, but I told you guys last week that right now my 101 is Juan Soto, and I'm going to continue to ride with that. Juan Soto is the first pick overall in this mock draft.
All right. I love it. And I am the 103. So
this will be fun. We're going to get to snipe each other a little bit here.
I am not too far behind. Okay.
So Trey Turner went off the board at pick number 2. Let's see what Chuck decides to do here.
All right. If my computer wants to cooperate with me, I have surprisingly slow connection here, folks. All right. Bryce Harper, I have to admit, is a bit of a tease of an option at the 3rd spot. But Jose Ramirez also would be an incredible grab. Normally, I would have loved to get Fernando Tatis, but as we well know, he's simply not available.
Let's see. So, Chuck, you're back on the clock. We're in the back end of the second round. So, you took Ramirez at 3, Guerrero, Bichette, Ohtani, Garrett Cole, Harper, Mike Trout, and then Corbin Burns rounded out round 1. Then we had Acuna, Betts, Kyle Tucker, Walker Buehler, Scherzer, Devers, and DeGrom. So it's back to Chuck.
All right, let's see what we're working with here. I think I'm a little delayed.
Let's see.
Geez, the CPU might end up picking for me.
Well, so Chuck, you ended up getting Freeman there. So Freeman's a nice pick for you at the end of the second round.
Freddie Freeman, I think I have him up towards the top of my first base rankings, so that's something I'm actually more than comfortable.
So I've got the next 2 picks. I'm going to go with Luis Robert in the outfield. I think he's real exciting, and he's going to provide some power potential, but he's also going to get some stolen bases for me this year. And then at the beginning of the third round, one guy that I think is going to be getting a little bit of a boost offensively this year, just with Acuna being healthy and Matt Olson being supplanting Freddie Freeman. I'm going to take Ozzie Albies here at the 301.
I like that. Ozzie Albies is a guy I try to grab for most of my drafts, so I think that's a high-quality pick right there, Andrew.
Did you get booted, Chuck?
I think I might have. I'm reloading and trying to get back in. Fantasy Pros is not being very friendly to my computer device.
That's okay. We're having some technical difficulties, but we can try to.
We'll try.
I wish I could pause this right now.
Let me try something here. Are you still in the draft lobby, Andrew?
I am still in the draft lobby at this current time, yes.
Okay, just making sure. Because for some reason I was having some technical difficulties. I'm sorry about that, folks. Usually happens.
No, that's okay.
Guess this is my sign to get a new computer, which I guess I will be doing sooner rather than later.
Just electric content coming out of our corners today.
Hey, it's stuff that's gonna happen every so often. I guess we gotta learn to live with it. You know, it's not what
it's a real shame too, because I was loving the team that I was putting together there.
You did have a nice squad. Luis Robert, while we're on that subject, very good outfielder. I have
surprised that he was available at the back of the second round.
Yeah, not a player you typically think would be available, to be honest, at that stage. This is frustrating.
Well, here, let me see if I can pull one up myself, and we can just walk through and draft one together.
That sounds like a much better idea. I'm sorry about that, folks. That was an unfortunate set of technical difficulties. My good co-host Andrew will pull us up a quality mock draft that he can have us work through on.
All right, I'm just getting it set up here. Trying to give it the same parameters that we had earlier, Chuck. We're going with one catcher, one position at each infield spot, a corner infielder and a middle infielder, 5 total outfielders, 1 utility, and then 8 bench spots, 3 starting pitchers, 3 relief pitchers, 2 pitchers, no DHs.
Yep. I think we had 2 utility, not 1.
All right, so we're going to be drafting from the 104 here, and this is going to be a 10-teamer. And let me share my screen here with you all. Actually, I don't think I'm going to be able to share my screen, so I take that back. So, Chuck, I'm going to just walk through here. My powerful narrating is going to help us succeed here. So at the 101, Trey Turner went off the board. So he was your 101 pick from last week's podcast. Juan Soto went off at 102, so my 101 pick is gone. And then Vladimir Guerrero Jr. went off the board at 103. So you had mentioned when you were getting ready to pick from the 103, Jose Ramirez was a guy that might be enticing to you, especially because, as we've mentioned, third base is such a hard position to draft in fantasy because you're either getting a guy really, really strong at the top or you're not going to be able to get anything except for shooting for upside. So Do you think Ramirez is a guy that we should take here at 104, or would you be looking elsewhere? Bryce Harper's also available. Like you said, he could be an enticing pick. What do you think?
I think that at this stage, you want to get the best player available. And in my mind, Jose Ramirez is the best player available at this pick. He's the best third baseman available without question. He can hit for power. He's got a bit of speed as well, high contact. He rarely strikes out, which is a huge bonus you want for fantasy, because in a lot of leagues that people play in, you lose points if your hitter strikes out a lot. So that kind of takes away from guys like Joey Gallo. So a guy like Jose Ramirez, who does not strike out a lot, that's incredible value. And in, like we said, Andrew, a very weak position at third base, you want to get the cream of the crop. So Jose Ramirez should be the pick at the 104.
I would agree with you there. He's a legit 30-30 threat, and he's going to be the face of the new Cleveland Guardians franchise this year, offensively and just from a player personnel standpoint. So he's a guy that I feel real comfortable taking a swing on in the early first round. All right, so we're going to be back up here in the second in a couple seconds. Let's roll through some picks as they're happening. So Bo Bichette went off next at the 105. I like Bichette, but 105 seems a little bit early to me. I'd feel more comfortable maybe at the back of the first round or maybe the early second round.
Bichette saw that boost because of the Tatis injury, so I think some of the shortstops have seen a bit of an increase in the rankings lately. So that sure. I can understand it, but I also do have to echo your sentiment. 105 seems a bit too high when there's a lot of other high-quality players on the board.
Yeah. So Garrett Cole then went off the board. He was the first pitcher, then Harper. Ohtani and Burns, two more pitchers after that, and then Acuna again to end the first round. So Acuna is a great value, in my opinion, at the back end of the first round, if you can get him there.
Absolutely.
DeGrom and Buehler were both off the board. Mike Trout, Mookie Betts, Freddie Freeman, and then Kyle Tucker, who's become kind of a fantasy baseball darling in the last year or two. He goes off the board at 206. Right before us. So we're back on the board at 207 here. Luis Robert is available. He was a guy that I took that you kind of like that pick in the second round. We're back up in the late second here. I still think it's too early to take a pitcher, but we could take a swing on a guy like Max Scherzer, who's got proven production. But the fact that he's on the Mets scares me because we've seen a guy like Jacob deGrom not get the kind of win results that you want just due to some poor production in the past. What are you thinking here, Chuck? Who would you kind of be rooting for from the back of the second round?
So typically at points like these, I kind of like to take a swing at a starter, but that's only if the board kind of falls to the way I want. If there was a pitcher better than Scherzer, I think I would take a swing. What are some of the other players at the top of the board right now, Andrew? Can you read them off?
Yeah, so Rafael Devers is available. Obviously, he would be another good corner infield spot for us, but don't really want to swing for the fences there, especially just since this is a mock. It might make sense to take Devers if he's available to have two of the best third basemen in fantasy. You could maybe try to trade one of them later on in the season, but let's try to stay away from that for here. Scherzer is a pitcher that's popping out to me, but Brandon Woodruff is available. Shane Bieber is available. Julio Urias with the Dodgers is available. So, to me, none of those guys really stands out except for Shane Bieber, just because we know he's good, but he's a guy that we might be able to get next pick.
Right.
What about, we talked about it earlier, Luis Robert, Ozzie Albies, they're both available too, do you think we go ahead and just bite the bullet and take a pitcher here? Maybe go Shane Bieber just so he doesn't get sniped from us again on the 2-3 turn.
I want to get a legitimate ace for ace of the staff for this team, and Shane Bieber is just that, unquestioned. And I think we can still get a very good hitter with our next pick early in the third round.
All right, so we're going to take Shane Bieber at the 207. All right, well, Devers went off the board with the very next pick, so again, third baseman, they're kind of like tight ends in fantasy football. You either want to get a good one early or you kind of want to wait to see who's available that you can scoop up with value. So a few pitchers went off the board. Scherzer went off the board. Woodruff went off the board. Kind of a surprise, Zach Wheeler went off the board early in the third round. And we did lose Luis Robert and Ozzie Albies as well. So it's back to us at the 304. You said that we were looking for a power bat or just a good offensive producer. So some of the top guys right here at the 304, Manny Machado, third baseman with the Padres. Again, it just wants to keep feeding us third baseman, Chuck. I don't know what it is. It must be reading our minds. Yordan Alvarez with the Astros. Starlin Marte, New York Mets.
No, you don't. Stop. Yordan Alvarez is the pick. That man is an absolute hitting machine. He rates. He is a guy who can hit 40 home runs, drive in 100 runs, and hit 330. He will strike out a bit, but I think that's something I'll take every day of the week. Yordan Alvarez for me.
You don't think that there's going to be a little bit of negative correlation with his production because Correa is gone? You think he's going to step up and continue to produce?
And it's not like there's still aren't hitters in that offense. Jose Altuve is still there. He's still a quality hitter as much as I don't care for the person. Tucker, who I do love Kyle Tucker. He's still a great hitter. He's going to offer some protection in that lineup as well. And actually, top prospect Jeremy Pena has been producing pretty well in spring training. It looks like he's going to start a shortstop job. Yuli Gurriel still looks like he's a capable hitter at his age as well. It's not like the Astros lineup is lacking. Yordan Alvarez has some protection, so I would love that for our third round selection.
All right, so we pounce on Yordan Alvarez in the third. So just to recap, our team right now, we've got Jose Ramirez from the 104, Shane Bieber at the 207, and then Yordan Alvarez at the 304. So now we're back on the clock at the 407. A couple guys that went off the board right before us. Chuck, one of your favorites, Wander Franco, he went off the board at 403, so we're not going to be able to pounce on him. A couple outfielders right before us, too. The first catcher goes off the board at the 401 and Salvador Perez. And then Aaron Nola goes at the 406, starting pitcher with the Phillies right before us. So we still could get a top-end starting pitcher if we wanted to at the 407. Lucas Giolito is still available. I'd kind of stay away from the Marlins at this point because of their kind of lack of offense. But Sandy Alcantara is still available. Freddie Peralta with the Brewers, and then Lance Lynn also with the White Sox. But I think I'd rather have Giolito over Lynn for this season and redraft. You think we should go pitcher here? Or should we try to take a shot at a guy that just signed a new contract with the Boston Red Sox and Trevor Story, who's available at the 407?
Oh, I know our good friend Fernando would absolutely love for us to take Trevor Story, but
he would.
I'm not ready to take Trevor Story just yet because I think there are some better options on the board. Can you read some of the hitters that are at the top of the board right now, Andrew, if you don't mind?
Absolutely. So just sticking at shortstop, Tim Anderson is available. Trevor Story, like we mentioned, Marcus Semien, and then Francisco Lindor, who has really fallen down in ADP. He was kind of a perennial first-round pick for a couple seasons. At first base, Paul Goldschmidt is available right now. He's a solid run producer with the Cardinals, but he is getting a little bit older. He's 34 this season. And historically, he's not a great fantasy producer right out of the gate, too. So just something to keep in mind. Austin Riley is available. Pete Alonso, Jose Abreu. Looking at the outfield, Nick Castellanos is available. George Springer. We mentioned Whit Merrifield. He's eligible for second base and outfield if you're looking for dual eligibility. And then I mentioned one catcher's off the board. Salvador Perez is off the board, but he's the only catcher. So JT Realmuto is still available. Although we might, if we take him here, we might be taking him maybe like a round too early. So what do you think? Any of those names pop out to you?
I might have to butt in here, and I'm going to have to say Trevor Story is the pick here.
Oh, no. Fernando sabotaging because he needs us to take Trevor Story.
I would love if Trevor Story went on your team.
All right. Well, I guess we have to take Trevor Story.
Really? That's the proper pick here. We're leaving some ace-level pitchers on the board.
But you're leaving an ace second baseman on the board.
Oh.
That is true. He might get dual eligibility, second and shortstop. That might make him just a little bit more valuable.
I don't know. I'm of the mind right now where I think you either take Francisco Lindor, who I'm of the belief is going to have a huge bounce back season because that's just not the Francisco Lindor that I know, or take a pitcher because I think Lucas Giolito or Freddie Peralta, especially Freddie Peralta, who I think somehow is criminally underrated just because of the fact that he's in the same rotation as Corbin Burns and Brandon Woodruff, who I think is an ace in his own right. So it's just my opinion. Obviously, Fernando, we have a little bit of a disagreement. But
I had to come in and let Trevor Story be known.
Hey, no, well, we appreciate it. So I'm gonna compromise here. So we're not gonna get Trevor Story if he comes back to us. So we're gonna have to take Trevor Story here to appease Fernando because clearly he wants him so badly. But Chuck, you get to pick. I'm not even gonna consult with you. You get to tell me. I'll read off some of the best available names. You're just gonna tell me who to pick with the next pick.
All right, Fernando, you happy? You got
All right, here we go. So we got Trevor Story at the 407.
Oh,
time for Chuck to be very upset when I read off some of the names that just got drafted. Marcus Semien at the 408, Tim Anderson at 409, Francisco Lindor at 410. So we did start a little domino going off the board. But we lost Lindor, who Chuck was pounding the table for. So if you're listening, guys, grab Francisco Lindor at the back end of 4th rounds if he's available.
Oh, he's going to be a top 5 shortstop this year.
Well, Trevor Story's going to be a top 5 second baseman, so we're good. We're still winning.
I don't know about that. I'm a little skeptical.
We'll see. We'll see. It's just a mock, though. So
I'll admit top 10. I will not dispute top 10.
If any of you are in a fantasy baseball league with Fernando, draft Trevor Story and then immediately offer him in a trade for way more than he's worth, and Fernando will probably give him.
I'll send Lindor for him.
So then Eloy went off the board at the 501, Merrifield at the 502, and then Lucas Giolito went off the board at the 503. Chuck, Freddie Peralta is still available. Should we take him right now?
Just take Freddie Peralta.
All right, we're gonna take.
He's still got a good player.
We're gonna take Freddie Peralta.
That's amazing value. He's an ace.
Freddie Peralta at the 504. This is the 44th overall pick. He's probably at this point like close to the 15th or 20th pitcher off the board. I would agree. He's probably going to outperform that average draft position, and that's what you're looking for as we start to get towards these middle rounds. All right, so again, a few more pitchers falling off the board. Sandy Alcantara, Liam Hendricks, Josh Hader, so some relievers are starting to get picked up. Kevin Gossman for the Blue Jays goes at the 604. So we're back up at the 607. Tyler O'Neill just went at the 605, who I was kind of hoping would fall to us. He's a Cardinals fan. I love Tyler O'Neill, but he's a solid fantasy producer because of his speed and because of his pop at the plate, although he is another guy that does strike out a lot. Pete Alonso at the 606. So we're at the 607. Chuck, I'll just throw some more pitchers out there. A couple guys that are popping out to me. Lance Lynn is still available at the 607. Max Fried from the Braves. Jose Barrios with the Blue Jays. And then Joe Musgrove. And I kind of like Barrios because Gossman just went a couple picks before he did. I think Barrios is a much better fantasy asset as a pitcher this year than Kevin Gossman. You think he should just pull the trigger there?
Any Blue Jay starter, just because of the fact that potent lineup is going to give you so much production. That feels like I don't want to guarantee like an easy win, but if you're higher percentage of wins for a Blue Jay starter compared to maybe some other pitchers in the rest of the league. Jose Barrios get 15 to 18 wins in a season. That's incredibly valuable for fantasy because I know I play in a lot of leagues where a win gets to 5 fantasy points, and that could be a make or break difference in a matchup you might have with an opponent. I would like to see some of the hitters on the board, though, because while beefing up pitching is important, we want to make sure we have some big boppers in that lineup.
All right. Well, I got convinced with your argument, so I actually just went ahead and hit the draft button on Jose Barrios. So our starting pitchers are set at this point. We've picked up Freddie Peralta. We've picked up, of course, Shane Bieber, and we've picked up Jose Barrios. So our 3 starting pitcher spots are just cemented. Forget about it. Don't even touch it the entire regular season unless one of those guys has to miss time with an injury. We're at the 704, but we have taken 3 pitchers already, so we're a little bit slim with some position players. So, Chuck, I'm going to read off some of the guys available at the middle of the second round. Ketel Marte, who has dual position eligibility with the Diamondbacks. He's interesting because he's kind of had a late offensive burst to his career, and he is going to be on a Diamondbacks team that is certainly not going to compete in the NL West, but they should score some runs, and he is going to be a big producer for them. A lot of people's favorite, Alberto Mondesi is available. We know his ceiling is incredibly high, but he just can't stay healthy, and he's not a very consistent producer. And then it's recommending a couple relief pitchers for us, Edwin Diaz and Raciel Iglesias.
Get that out of here. No.
I mean, Ketel Marte is a guy that I'd be okay with drafting here, but I don't love it. Jose Altuve is still available too. He's a guy that just being a piece of that Astros offense and maybe even just taking into the account that we already have one keg in the machine in Houston with Yordan Alvarez. You know, might not be a terrible idea to stack him with another guy on the Astros. Baez and Correa are both available to exciting shortstops. Chris Bryant and Anthony Rendon are both available at third base. And then Nick Castellanos, JD Martinez are two of the big outfielders that are standing out. So what do you think here, Chuck? My personal favorite would honestly just to be to take Altuve here. But what do you think? Is there someone else that you like more than him right now?
I'm kind of the same mind you are because I still think it's too early to take a reliever. I'm always on the wait and see approach for relief pitchers. I think we need a second baseman or we need a shortstop because those markets can tend to dry up pretty quick. I'm of that belief. So getting Altuve would be good because I think he's still a top 10 player at the position. And same thing with Carlos Correa, and I think he's going to be helped by being the primary focal point on offense for the Twins as well. So I think he's a good player for shortstop since we missed on Francisco Lindor earlier. I really wanted to grab, but
that was totally not my fault. Not at all. But I definitely would like to put my input on this next pick. Either this pick or next pick. I'm not sure if Cody Ballinger is still on the board. Oof. But if he is, that's someone to look out for.
Mr. who struck out 8 times in a row in spring training so far.
That's okay. Yeah. It's only spring training.
I was going to say he has not been getting anywhere near his MVP ways.
He does not inspire any confidence right now whatsoever.
So he's available, Fernando, but his ADP is in the 90s right now. And we're right now drafting at 64 overall. So, Chuck, you had mentioned that Correa is kind of enticing. Correa's ADP is 84. So he'd be a guy that we could wait to see if he falls back to us in the 8th round. But if we get Altuve right here, he's a little bit of a value for us. He's going off the board typically around the 60th pick, and we'd be getting him at 64th.
I like that. Second base, I think, is a much weaker position than shortstop. Let's pull that trigger.
All right, we've got Jose Altuve. So now fingers crossed that Correa comes back to us. Wow. Now I feel like we screwed up. And this is my fault. Fernando Tatis went off the board at the 801.
Oh!
And we completely missed it. We were too focused. We were too focused on guys that are I can't believe that. Let me see. Tatis's ADP is 30, so that's just poor. That's just a poor job by Fantasy Pros for not even having him show up as a suggested player for us for the last 4 rounds, 5 rounds, 6 rounds. But Fernando Tatis Jr. goes off the board at the 801. If this mock draft is any indicator of how real fantasy drafts are actually going to happen, if you can get Fernando Tatis in the 8th round, congratulations, but you probably waited 4 rounds too long to get him. In the 3rd round, I would probably consider taking Tatis depending on who's available right now. I don't care if he's going to miss until a week before the All-Star break. Well, okay, maybe I do care if he's going to miss that much time, but he's not. You know, he's a guy that I'm pulling the trigger on well before the 801.
Oh, that's incredible.
Well, I do have some good news. Carlos Correa is still available. So is Javi Baez. So is Jorge Polanco. Those are kind of the 3 leading guys at shortstop. Does dual eligibility weigh into you at all when you're making any of these decisions, Chuck? Because Correa is only eligible as a shortstop, but Baez and Polanco could play either middle infield spot.
Right. There is value in having that multi-positional eligibility, and the versatility is always useful. But I like to secure one key starter just at each position where their eligibility is basically just that position. And then later on, as the draft progresses, I try to find more of those utility guys who can fill in everywhere. So I think at this point, getting Correa would be pretty approximate value because we're at what pick are we at? We're at 807 right now?
Yeah, we're 77th overall, and Correa goes off at 84th. So It's not really that much of a reach. And at some point, especially when you start getting into the later rounds, the double-digit rounds, you don't necessarily want to be just going for guys at ADP. You want to start taking shots at guys that you think are going to have big seasons because at the end of the day, we're drafting for ceiling. We're not drafting for floor. Correa is a guy in a new offense that he could be a really exciting piece to watch. So I think we go ahead and draft him, and now we're solidified up the middle with both Trevor Story, Jose Altuve, and then Carlos Correa.
Trevor Story.
Yes, my boy. My boy,
salty.
Trevor Story.
We're probably correct me if I'm wrong, Chuck, but we might never draft Trevor Story again in the history of this podcast.
We might not. We'll see. Fernando,
Wow.
another draft next week, so stay tuned.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right,
Andrew.
so now we're back on the clock at 9:04. So let's just recap really quickly here our team. So not going by ADP, I'm just going to read off kind of how our roster's filling out. So at second, we don't have a catcher or first baseman yet. At second base, we have Jose Altuve. At shortstop, we have Trevor Story. At third base, we have Jose Ramirez. Our middle infielder right now is Carlos Correa. We have Yordan Alvarez as our only outfielder. We do still have 4 starting outfield spots to fill, so that might be a position we look to hammer here in the next couple rounds. And then we have our 3 starters locked up in Shane Bieber, Freddie Peralta, and Jose Barrios. So, Chuck, again, we're on the clock here at 9:04, so we're 84th overall. A couple guys, it's continuing to recommend just the wrong positions for me here. It's recommending Jorge Polanco as another middle infielder, but we're already set there. Let's look at outfield because that's a position I said we need. And here's a couple interesting guys. Brian Reynolds is a guy who stands out to me as being the only reasonable fantasy asset in Pittsburgh, but it is Pittsburgh. So he might drive in as many runs as he hits home runs this year because he might not ever have anyone on base in front of him. Your New York Yankee, Giancarlo Stanton, is available. He's certainly a ceiling play. He could mess around and hit 55 home runs this year. And I think in the 9th round, he's probably my favorite pick. But then you also have Christian Yelich, who could be a bounce back. Mitch Haniger is an option.
You don't
Fernando said it earlier. Cody Ballinger could be an option potentially right here.
Any more names? We had the pick is in. The pick is in, and you know who's going to be. You know who's going to be.
Giancarlo Stanton.
Guy who was healthy last year. He was producing. He is a guy who can easily crush 40 home runs, drive in 100 runs, and was going to be a very potent New York Yankees offense, especially with his co-Bash brother Aaron Judge. So getting Giancarlo Stanton this late, I honestly think is an absolute steal. I don't give a crap of where that ADP is.
No,
right,
he's a Yankee player.
Let me ask you, because we still do have a couple outfield spots.
I want to hear it.
Listen,
hey,
Yankees is good.
Cody Bellinger's available right here. Cody Bellinger's available at the 10:07. We're the 97th pick overall. You know, again, he's not looking great right now. He had a really down season offensively last year, but he's only a couple of years removed from being an MVP candidate, and he is a Los Angeles Dodger. If you can get a guy that's going to be starting a majority of the games for the Dodgers later in your drafts at value. Again, Chuck, we're drafting for ceiling here. Tell me that you don't think there's a 1 in 4 chance that Cody Ballinger even just hits 30 home runs this year and bats like 270.
Sure.
Tell me that you don't think that's in the range of his outcomes for this year.
You can't rule it out, but I just think that other 75%, I think we're going to see a platoon bat Cody Ballinger where he strikes out 150 plus times and continues to struggle because we've seen it for 2 years in a row now. And I'm just at the point where I don't want to take any more chances like that because this is a player that could actually drag our team down. And I don't want guys who are getting like, in a 1 week span, 20 strikeouts. That's a severe hampering on a fantasy team. That's not something you can really afford. It's something that, at least for my rosters, I try to avoid, high strikeout guys.
Sure. All right. Well, Chuck, right now the top rated guys are pretty much pitchers at this point. So it is a good time to look at some pitching value that's fallen.
Let's hear it.
A guy that's standing out to me, Alek Manoah with the Blue Jays, is still available right now. He kind of busted out of nowhere last season, was a guy that a lot of people picked up off the waiver wires and probably made a run at their fantasy baseball championships last year. He's still available here at the 10:07. Justin Verlander is available. Carlos Rodon is available. A couple of relief pitchers. We've got Kenley Jansen, who's now with the Braves, but he's slotting in as their closer. We have kind of seen him kind of lose some production in years past, so I might stay away from him right now. Guy who had a great season last year with the Cardinals, Giovanni Gallegos, is available here. Jordan Romano with the Blue Jays, who's their closer. Blake Trinan, who's the Dodgers closer. But, again, none of these guys are really popping out to me other than from the name recognition. Here's a guy I'm going to throw at you, Chuck. He seems like a good value pick, but we might be able to get him in the next round. But I think he's going to have a really productive season for fantasy. And like you said, he's definitely not going to drag the team down with a lot of negative outings. Is Tommy Edmund with the Cardinals. He's got dual position eligibility as a second baseman and an outfielder. He's not a guy that has a ton of pop, but he's a very low strikeout, high on base percentage guy. He's fast. He steals bases. He can score a lot of runs for you. And he hits the ball at a pretty decent clip. I believe he was above a 270 average last year. And he bats leadoff for the Cardinals, so he's got Goldschmidt and Arenado and Tyler O'Neill to kind of drive him in when he's on base. What do you think about taking a guy like him in the 10th round? We could plug him into an outfield spot and just kind of see how his season goes.
I would love a pick like that, but I kind of want to get a pitcher this round.
Okay.
Is Kershaw available?
Kershaw is probably available. Let me see. He is. Yeah, he is going off the board at 113. So we could probably get him in at least one more round. We're going to be up again in 6 picks after this one.
See, I'm of the mind that we should grab another ace level / number 2 type starter here while we can. And I think within the next few picks, Tommy Edmund will still be lying around.
True. Well, what do you think here? Should we take Manoah with the Blue Jays? Should we take Verlander, who's been a proven ace his whole career, although granted he's coming back from an injury?
I like Rodon.
You like Rodon?
I like Rodon.
Okay.
We saw what the Giants were able to do for Kevin Gossman out of nowhere, and Carlos Rodon already has ace-level stuff that he did with the White Sox last year. So I think the Giants can just make him into an even better version of what he's been.
All right, well, let's do it. So we've got Carlos Rodon coming off the board at the back end of the 10th round at the 10:07. So Cody Ballinger went off the board at 11:02, so Fernando just jumped off, but unfortunately for Fernando, we're not going to get Cody Ballinger and Trevor Story on the same fantasy team. Tommy Edmund is still available. Is he a guy that you kind of like at this point in drafts? I mean, yeah. I think that he's just like I said, he's not going to be a guy that's even going to contend for like 20 home runs, but he's going to play pretty much every day for the Cardinals. He's going to be batting in front of some really talented offensive producers. He plays all over the field and he doesn't strike out a lot. So you're rarely going to see like a -2 type of performance from Tommy Edmund.
Yeah,
so we'll draft him, plug him in as our third outfielder.
Absolutely. I agree. You know what he is? He's a jack of all trades type of guy, Andrew. And you would know from watching him on your Cardinals. He's a guy that can do a little bit of everything. He has a little bit of pop. He can hit 10 to 15 home runs. He's going to steal some bases for you. He doesn't strike out that much, so he's not going to be a drag, like I said earlier. So that's great value, I think, at this point around. You're getting a guy who can kind of do a little bit of everything and fill the stat sheet for you, which is what you want in a points-based league.
Yeah, definitely. All right, so now it's back to us. I think we're probably just going to do a couple more rounds here and then wrap it up before we start getting into some of the back end of it. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 starting spots to fill out, and then I think 2 more pitchers that we still need to draft. So
we'll try to make it pretty quick for you guys. We won't try to be as long-winded, so we can wind up the show at a decent time. But we'll talk about it for a little bit, and then we'll just move on.
Yeah, and we'll be doing another draft next week too. Hopefully, fingers crossed, we don't have as many technical difficulties, or being our hands being dealt to draft Trevor Story in the 4th round.
Yeah,
this time. All right, so Chuck, let's see. We got a couple outfield spots we still need to fill. We could be looking at catcher and first base right here. Just looking at some of the positions available. Jared Walsh is still available at first base. He's a guy that's going to, provide some pop offensively, and it is exciting to think about him hitting around Mike Trout and Shohei Ohtani as well. Rhys Hoskins is available. Ryan Mountcastle is available. No catchers that seem really exciting. The next recommended catcher for us is Keibert Ruiz with Washington. But we're at 117 overall. And the next best catchers ranked ADP wise is at 162.
Yeah, no. You wait on catcher. What's the outfield looking like? Because we could fill another outfield spot.
Franmil Reyes is available with Cleveland. Mountcastle counts as outfield eligible as well as first base. Austin Meadows, who's been a solid fantasy producer for the past couple seasons, is still available. And then an exciting prospect with the Padres, Trent Grisham, is also being thrown out right here. Out of those guys, I mean, I probably would lean with drafting Franmil Reyes, and that would be nice to pair him with Jose Ramirez. But there's something about Mountcastle that's just appealing because he was a solid producer last year in Baltimore, and he's a guy too that, you know, if we draft him now in the 12th round, the Orioles are probably going to be selling some guys around the trade deadline. He's a guy that, you know, imagine him getting dealt to like the Yankees or something. You know, if there's an injury and they need him to DH or play an outfield spot, like he would be an absolute smash at value if he moved to a more competitive roster.
Yeah, right now I'm not too sold on Mountcastle. We got to remember he's a righty bat, and they just moved back the left field fences and left field wall at Camden Yards, so that's going to hurt a lot of their right-handed hitters. So that kind of moves Mountcastle back a little bit for me. I think honestly a good option at this point in our draft would be to kind of go and grab Jared Walsh, who's going to have that protection in the order. He can play first base. If I'm not mistaken, I know he was last year. He was outfield eligible.
Yeah, he is outfield eligible as well, so he gives us some flexibility there.
Having that versatility is handy. I think that's what we should go with.
All right, so we've got Jared Walsh at our next pick. So now we're back on the board at 1304. So now we're at 124th overall. So just to kind of recap some of the big names that we've drafted the past couple of rounds, we took Carlos Rodon, who is looking like he's probably going to be a top of the rotation guy for the Giants this year. We took Tommy Edmund, who has second base and outfield eligibility with the Cardinals, who we're just looking for a lot of consistent production from and not a lot of negative games. And then Jared Walsh, who's first base eligible for us, but also has outfield eligibility. Our team's looking pretty good so far. We also got Giancarlo Stanton at value a couple rounds ago. Austin Meadows is still a guy that they're recommending to us. Gurriel Jr. with the Blue Jays is available as an outfielder, kind of a super utility guy. Chris Taylor is also being recommended, but I don't really love taking Chris Taylor in fantasy drafts at this point.
I kind of like her.
So here's an option. Blake Snell is still available with the Padres. He would be, again, that would be 5 starting pitchers that we've drafted. But again, you know, we have 5 ace level guys if we take a shot at Blake Snell here. What do you think? Because after him, you know, the next best guy is Chris Bassett off the board, Pablo Lopez, Eduardo Rodriguez. Blake Snell might be like the last ace quality guy left.
Yeah, he probably is, but Blake Snell has not pitched like an ace over the past season and a half or so. So there's a great deal of risk, but we are drafting for ceiling, so that's a pick I don't hate.
All right, well, let's go ahead and take Blake Snell here. So we took Blake Snell in the 13th round. Seen a lot more pitchers coming off the board here in this mock draft. We're going to be back up at 1407. So Jared Kelenic just went off the board. Is it Kelenic or Selenic? I can't remember.
I pronounce it Kelenic, actually.
Kelenic? Okay.
I could be wrong, but there's probably people who pronounce it a different way.
Well, he just went off the board right before our pick, and he's the guy that I was kind of looking out for is, he's been a promising prospect. He might be a good value in drafts. And that actually leads me to a good point here. We're at the 1407. We're at 137th overall. We don't have a catcher yet, Chuck. I think you know where I'm going with this, though. Is it too early for us to draft Adley Rutschman? Or should we wait and try to get him later because this is a mock draft, and I'm going to even look right now and just see what his ADP is right now. His ADP is 206, so we're at 137. Is it way too early yet? I'm just thinking about it because we don't have a catcher locked up yet, but he's a guy that as soon as he gets called up is going to be our starting catcher if he's on our team.
I just think it's still too early to go for a catcher, and we talked about this on before we came on the show, Andrew. It's just Rutschman's, he's not going to be ready to go at the beginning of the season. He's got a triceps injury, so he's going to be missing a few weeks. So you're basically asking for just literally a black hole at the catcher position for your teams. And you don't want to start off on the wrong foot if you're trying to win. So you want to get a guy who can come in and help you compete right away at the catcher spot. So I think we should still wait, kind of fill some other holes, and just get catcher later.
All right. Well, open positions for us. We could draft another corner infielder here if we wanted to. Like we've said, catcher's open. We have 2 outfield spots and our utility spot. And then our pitching staff is full other than 3 relief pitchers. So in the 14th round, it could be a good time to look at relief pitching values. Looking through it here, the only one that's a value based on ADP right now is Mark Melancon, but he's with the Diamondbacks. He's getting up there in age. Might be the closer for them, but how many games are the Diamondbacks going to have save situations in that are going to be appealing for us as fantasy managers? So he's probably a stay away for me at this point. Anybody that is standing out to you from a value standpoint, or is there a certain position that you want me to pull up and look at right now? We do have a couple outfield spots that are still available, and it's recommending Gurriel Jr. to us from an outfield spot. Might not be the worst idea to grab a Blue Jays player.
That's a great value. I was hammering the gavel for him a little earlier when we were talking about it because I just think getting any bat in that Blue Jays lineup is great because they're going to want to pitch to him. They don't want to pitch to Vladdy or Bichette. They want to pitch to him, and he's going to mash. He's a good hitter, so let's grab him.
Yeah, and he's another guy that again, a little underrated value as you're going through your fantasy drafts is the guys with dual position eligibility. We now have. It's plugging Gurriel in as our corner infielder here on our roster, but he's a guy that could be an outfield option as well as a first base option for us. So open positions, catcher, 2 outfield spots, utility, and then 3 relief pitcher spots. Where should we go from here? We're at the 15th round, 1504. We're at 144 overall. Rhys Hoskins is still available. He's a screaming value based on ADP right now. His ADP is 129. He's available at 144th overall, and he could be in our utility spot. Gleyber Torres is still available. We were talking about him before the show started, or at the very beginning of the show, I should say, about how he's kind of been surprisingly productive so far this spring, and he could be another middle infielder that we'll hoard in this mock draft that could go into our utility spot. And then outfield-wise, we've got Hunter Renfroe, Alex Verdugo from Boston, who's kind of an exciting prospect, but we're still kind of waiting for him to kind of take that big next leap as a hitter for fantasy purposes. What do you think here? Do you think we should take Gleyber? Because you seem the most excited about taking Gleyber right here.
Well, I think it's either Hoskins or Gleyber because Hoskins is a big power bat in the Philly offense that just added some boppers and Schwarber and Castellanos. So Hoskins will have some protection there. But with Gleyber Torres, we're banking on upside, and Gleyber Torres probably has the highest upside out of any of the guys that we mentioned because he's only 2 years removed from a season where he crushed 38 home runs and nearly drove in 100 runs. He's a high pedigree prospect. He was a high pedigree prospect. You can still get back to that level now that he's in a more comfortable defensive position. He could slot in our utility and provide way more value than where he's currently projected to go.
I agree. So I think we should just take Gleyber here because, like you said, we're drafting for upside. If we take Rhys Hoskins, there's a chance that we could get Gleyber again, but we'll probably be waiting like 10 plus picks before our next pick. So I'm gonna say let's go ahead and take Gleyber here and hope for the best upside with him. All right, so Rhys Hoskins goes off the board 2 picks after ours. So yeah, the value he was just not going to be sticking around too much longer. Verdugo went off the board as well. All right, so I'm thinking right here, this is where we should try to look at taking our first relief pitcher or our first closer.
I concur.
Here's a guy that's interesting. I really like him personally, and I was waiting for him to start to become more of a value, and I think this is where I'd pull the trigger on him. Scott Barlow out of Kansas City.
Ooh.
He is like just the essence of a closer. Like if you just close your mind and you're a baseball fan and you just like picture what a closer should look like the bullpen gate opens and a guy comes running out, that's Scott Barlow. He just throws pellets. He throws BBs. He's really hard to hit off of. And I know that he plays for the Royals. I kind of said it with Melancon earlier. Why draft him? How many games are the Diamondbacks going to win, right? I don't think the Royals are going to be contenders, but I don't think Barlow's a guy that could have 25 saves in a row at some point this season, and I wouldn't be surprised by it. Like you just know exactly what you're going to get out of him every time he takes the ball. What do you think?
I concur. We need good relievers at this point, so can't be too picky. And this is a guy that has high upside. I think the Royals are going to surprise some people this year, so let's go and grab him.
Yeah. All right. So we've got our first reliever at 16:07 in Scott Barlow. All right. So now we're back on the clock. Another guy that's interesting right here is Craig Kimbrell. Craig Kimbrell is still available. Is he currently – you're going to have to refresh me here. I know that he was with the White Sox last season. Is he still under contract, or is he a free agent right now?
I'm going to look that up for you right now.
Because I've seen a couple of people on Twitter mention that they're looking for Kimbrell to move to their favorite team, and I wasn't sure if they were wanting him to get traded or if they were just wanting him to get signed.
He's still on the White Sox. They've been trying to trade him but haven't had any luck.
Well, if they're trying to trade him, that could be good news for him, but that could also be bad news for him. So maybe we can stay away from Craig Kimbrell right now. Although, again, he's a solid producer. You know what you're going to get. Well, here's an interesting value play, but he'd go on our bench right now. Well, actually, I take that back because we could move one of our dual eligibility position players to the outfield. Anthony Rizzo is still available, Chuck.
Really?
Anthony Rizzo at 164th overall. The first baseman of the New York Yankees, who's going to be playing in Yankee Stadium, who we know has prolific power to really all fields, but he's a great pull side hitter. Rizzo's a guy that with a full season in Yankee Stadium, he could hit 30, 35 home runs this year. And he's available for us at the 1704. I think it'd be a crime for us not to draft him, even though we already have a couple of first baseman eligible players.
Yeah, let's put Jared Walsh in the outfield and put Rizzo at first base. Yeah,
I agree. All right, so actually, you know what? I have said a couple of negative things about Fantasy Pros in their mock draft simulator tonight, but they did automatically move Jared Walsh to the outfield spot on our roster. So good job, Fantasy Pros. I appreciate you guys for that. All right, so we are going to make 4 picks here to finish up. We're at 177 overall. We have catcher, outfielder, and 2 relief pitcher spots that are still open. Chuck, I'm going to go ahead and read the people off our team name and just let them, or all of our players, and just let them salivate for a moment, because we've got a real good squad so far. We've got Anthony Rizzo at first base, Jose Altuve at second base, Trevor Story at shortstop, Jose Ramirez at third base, Loris Gurriel as a corner infielder. He's also got outfield eligibility for us. Carlos Correa at shortstop. He's in our middle infielder slot. Yordan Alvarez in the outfield. Stanton in the outfield. Tommy Edmund in the outfield. Jared Walsh in the outfield. Gleyber Torres in the utility spot. Shane Bieber, Freddie Peralta, and Jose Barrios as our 3 aces, our 3 workhorses. We also have Carlos Rodon and upside hopeful Blake Snell as our 5th pitchers. And then Scott Barlow is our only relief pitcher so far. So I'm really happy with the squad so far. It's definitely got some boomer bust potential, which could hurt us some weeks. But when all of these guys are clicking, we're going to score a lot of fantasy points. So, again, catcher, outfield, and 2 relief pitcher spots are open here, Chuck. If we're looking at catcher, no catcher has been drafted in like 4 rounds. One of your darlings, Mitch Garver, is still available here. He wouldn't be a horrible option to open our season up as a starting catcher. Keibert Ruiz with Washington, who's a top prospect. One of the guys that they got, I believe, in either the Trey Turner or the Max Scherzer deal. I couldn't remember which. Or was that were they a package deal, actually? I think they were. So, yeah, he was just in that whole package. Those are some of the catchers available. Relief pitchers, Taylor Rogers, Kimbrell still available right now. Outfielders, we've got Avisail Garcia, Hunter Renfroe, Jorge Soler, Andrew Benintendi. What do you think?
I think it'd be good to get Garver because I feel like the level of talent catcher is probably going to drop off after that. He's a guy who's good. He's got some pop. He can give you.
I agree, and I knew you were going to want to take him if he's one of those the catchers that's available right there too.
It's not much better after that, so might as well.
All right, we got 3 picks left. We need 1 outfielder and 2 relief pitchers. Let's see who the outfielders are available just in case we don't miss any good values. An exciting guy, somebody that could be a real good value at 19 in the 19th round is Akil Baddoo. He's an outfielder with the Detroit Tigers. He does have some pop. He's very exciting to watch. He's fast. He plays a really good defensive outfield for them as well. But he is young and he doesn't have a ton of experience, so that could be something that works against him, which, again, that kind of is why his ADP is a little bit higher. Robbie Grossman, Andrew Benintendi, and Alex Kirilloff are the other big outfielders that are available right now. And then relief pitchers, Craig Kimbrell is still available at this point. We're in the 19th round. We're at 180 plus picks. If Craig Kimbrell's still available, I know exactly what he is. I know what I'm getting from him. I might go ahead and take a shot on him as one of our relievers. What do you think, Chuck?
That just screams value. He's going to be good for holds as long as he's in Chicago. And if he gets traded to a new home, he could very well become the closer, and that gets you saves, especially at a discount considering he's still available. I think we should probably just grab Kimbrell here while we can.
Yeah, and it doesn't matter how old the guy is. He's still productive. We know that if you've watched him pitch anytime the last couple of seasons. And when he retires, he's going to go down as one of the best relief pitchers in baseball history. So being able to draft a guy like that at the back of your fantasy drafts is huge. All right, 2 picks left. We need an outfielder and a relief pitcher again. Let's see. Outfielders. Pretty much all the same. Andrew Benintendi is a guy that I like as a player, but I don't really love him for fantasy because he doesn't really jump off the page in any one particular statistic. But he is a great defender. But again, you don't get fantasy points for defense. Austin Hayes is a guy who has some offensive potential in Baltimore, but he's also a little bit unproven, and Baltimore's just kind of a stay away from a fantasy perspective, just with the lack of options there at this point. We could take a shot at a guy like Alex Kirilloff, who is on the Minnesota Twins. He does have dual position eligibility. He can play first base and outfield. The Twins are an upgraded team. They're going to have talent around him, and Carlos Correa and Mitch Garver's on the Rangers now. I forgot that he's no longer on the Twins, but Carlos Correa is a guy who we already have. What do you think about adding another Twin to the lineup just in case they end up driving each other in a few times this year?
Can't hurt. I think the Twins are going to give Kirilloff a shot to play a lot this year, and I think he could bat towards the top of the order as well. And Correa probably would bat almost right behind him, if not a couple spots behind him. So the opportunity to help each other out a lot is going to be there. And at this point in the draft, we're kind of shooting for some high upside project guys. So I think it makes a lot of sense.
All right. So we're down to our last pick here. We need one more relief pitcher to shore up our bullpen. So the best guys available at ADP right now, Gregory Soto from Detroit. I'm just going to kind of stay. I prefer my relievers to be on good teams where they're not going to be, getting me negative fantasy outcomes because they have a poor team around them. So I'm going to stay away from Detroit as one of those teams. Matt Barnes is available out of Boston. He had a good season last year, but Boston's one of those staffs where I wouldn't be surprised if there's some regression to their pitching just across the board this year because of how well they performed last season. Any guys that you really like who's a Yankee right now? It's the last pick in the draft. Who's a guy that is going to be coming out of the Yankees bullpen that's going to be good for us this year that we can just put into that third slot and not have to worry about it, Chuck?
Jonathan Loaizaga. Is he there? Is he available?
Let me see. Spell that last name for me. Is it M-O or no? What is it? Jonathan. Oh, Jonathan Loaizaga. Okay, let's see. Yeah, he's available. His ADP is 335. So he's a guy that might go undrafted to start seasons, and you could just pick him up before the first game starts.
He's a guy that gets a lot of strikeouts. He's going to get a lot of holds. He's going to be pitching in a lot of key situations. He's going to get some wins as well in tight games because he's going to come in and be the fireman type guy for the Yankees. So that's a guy I kind of have my eye on. But if he's a guy you can wait on to pick up off of waivers, it's probably better.
Definitely. All right. Well, our team is filled, Chuck. I've already rambled it off a few different times here, so I'm not going to do that for the good people, but I am going to screenshot our final roster, and we'll be sure to post it on both of our Twitters. You can follow Chuck at FF_ChuckV. You can follow me at AQuinnFF on Twitter, as well as Sports Time HQ, who is the presenter of the Home Run Hitters podcast for Chuck and myself. So, Chuck, that wraps up the draft. I am looking forward to getting into another one with you so that we can draft against each other instead of with each other like this week. Next week, we were talking about this earlier. You thinking we do maybe a little like dynasty keeper twist on the draft too, just to make it a little more exciting for the people?
Might be a little fun to look at a long-term aspect of things. It really does change the way you draft. So, yeah, looking forward to it.
Yeah, well, I mean, we didn't even get to draft Adley Rutschman in this one, but I'm really excited to snipe him from you in this next draft. Because as you can tell, I'm way ahead of consensus on Adley Rutschman if I'm wanting to draft him in the 14th round if he's not going off till the 20th. So anyways, Chuck, anything else that you want to wrap up with, or should we let the people get out of here?
I think we covered all of it. Thanks for tuning in, everyone. We're going to be coming to you live next week, same time, same place. You know where to find us.
All right. Chuck, good chopping it up with you, man. Again, thanks to Sports Time HQ for presenting the podcast, and as well as Underdog Fantasy for sponsoring the Home Run Hitters podcast. Thanks for tuning in again, guys. We will see you all next Sunday evening. Cheers, Chuck.
Cheers.